Marriage should matter, and our enemies have value. Those are the two kind of thoughts that were on my mind after reading this week's comics on DC Universe Infinite. Hi, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics 1 week after their release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan and also explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything I talk about. First and only warning, many spoilers are ahead here. Right now, we're going to take a look at comics originally released to the Ultra tier on June 11th, 2024, originally published May 14th, 2024. Just two comics this time, actually. The first of them being Green Lantern number 11, where the storyline with the United Planets kind of like taking down different Lantern Corps across the spectrum is kind of boiling and getting more close to, I think, a head at this point. Hal and some fellow Lanterns, in addition to one turncoat United Planets Lantern who was basically betrayed by his authority figure and now is siding with the rebelling remaining Green Lanterns, have come to the Council of the United Planets with proof that, like, the main guy, what's his name? I can't even remember his name. Tharos, what's his name? Theros or Tharos or whatever. But he has been behind this movement to destroy all of these Lantern Corps, and just when they come to their moment of victory, we get the reveal that actually the whole council has been replaced by shape-shifting Durlans who are on the same team with Theros. Meanwhile, Carol Ferris, who clearly has some unresolved feelings, some remaining feelings for Hal, is with her current fiancé, boyfriend, can't remember exactly what their status is, and while she is processing her feelings about Hal, she, in seeming desire to put them to rest, says to her boyfriend, we should get married, we should do this today, and so they rush off to Vegas to get that done. And in this subplot, we've got another example of... I've said before, I have no idea where Jeremy Adams, the writer of this series, is, but in the pages of The Flash, I was picking up what I thought was at least some Christian influence, not just Christian culture, but specifically Christian values, kind of like bubbling to the surface. Whether he himself is a Christian or not, I have no idea, but maybe from cultural osmosis, family osmosis, he picked up some stuff. But another example would be here, where with this subplot with Carol going off with her boyfriend and them getting married in Vegas, I think we are clearly meant to see this decision as foolish and as really a devaluing of marriage. They go to this Chapel of Solitude in Vegas, themed around Superman, where they have all this themed merchandise they can buy. They can dress up in Superman and Supergirl costumes if they want, and they say, "We'll get you married faster than a speeding bullet," is their catchphrase, their slogan. And when her fiancé asks, is this, and they just answer, legal? Yes, as members of the Church of Krypton, we're recognized by the state of Nevada with the ability to confer marriage. That's the American way. Signed here, here, and here. And I think we're clearly supposed to see this as kind of ridiculous and without value. I think we're supposed to say to ourselves, oh my gosh, anybody that just makes up some crazy church can do this. What is happening to marriage that this can be done so quickly and easily and meaninglessly? The rings that you can buy at the chapel itself are themed around kryptonite, the different colors of kryptonite. It's just kind of ridiculous. And the vows, we live in a time where personalized vows that couples write for each other have become more and more common, and some of them can be very good, but some of them, they really go... They really go off the rails, away from anything that's truly meaningful, truly a commitment. And I think that's exemplified in the vows here, where the officiator, dressed up as Superman, spit curl and all, says, "Do you, Nathan Broom, take Carol Ferris to be your lawfully wedded wife? Do you promise to treat her with truth and justice and work toward a better tomorrow together?" And then to Carol, he says, "And you, Carol Ferris, do you promise to be stronger than a locomotive, to leap over tall problems together as one, to make this marriage a marriage of steel?" He prepares to wrap up saying, "Now, if anyone with X-ray or heat vision sees a reason these two should not be married, speak now or forever hold your..." And then, of course, we do get an interruption. But I mean, up to this point, I think we're supposed to very reasonably look at this and say, this is ridiculous. This is without meaning. What they've done, they've twisted this. They've made up their own version of what this is, and it's a really sad thing to see. But then, for me as a geek, a really cool thing to see is that the proceedings are interrupted by a sapphire ring. And this after the star sapphire battery has been destroyed and all the rings rendered dysfunctional. But yet we've got a working sapphire ring here that has appeared to Carol Ferris in this moment. And I can't help but wonder, okay, we just saw this thing with Hal go down where there was a secret battery hidden on Earth that was powering his new ring. How is this ring functional, and what does this mean for Carol Ferris, for her past and her future as Star Sapphire, a member of the Sapphire Corps, or whatever the crap it's called, you know? So I find this very interesting. It also, as a nerdy romantic as well as a Green Lantern nerd, just makes me think, oh, okay, great. This is maybe going to connect her with Hal again. In fact, when she sees the ring, it seemingly occurs to her this has something to do with Hal. Maybe there's some great need. Maybe Hal's in trouble, but she sees that ring floating there. And while the others are astonished, she gets a determined look on her face. And the one thing she says is, Hal. And the tease phrase for next issue is love joins the fight. So I would love it. You know, as I said regarding reactions to the early issues of this, when there was a conversation between Hal and Barry, it seemed like what was being foreshadowed was the idea that Hal Jordan was going to kind of grow up in terms of how he was treating his relationships. And Barry was like, why haven't you really gotten serious with Carol? You've been doing this thing for so long, and look at Wally. He's settled down. He's got a family. You know, I mean, there was this kind of call up to true adulthood, true responsible and committed marriage. I think is what Barry is probably getting at. You know, so I can't help but wonder if all of this is ultimately heading that way. Who knows if Jeremy Adams will be on the book long enough to do that, or if he has the desire to do that. But I'm hopeful that at least we'll get this nice, long, ongoing story where we see a romance between Hal and Carol that is allowed to actually mature and get past the very surface level, sophomoric types of on and off and disputes here and there and all this kind of stuff that are very CW, and, you know, get out of the 20s, the teens version concept of romance, as shallow as it is, and get it into something that's more adult and wizened. So anyway, we'll see what happens, but that was definitely something that stood out to me in Green Lantern number 11. The other book I'll mention is Suicide Squad Dream Team, number 3 of 4. This is a countdown to the big Absolute Power event where Amanda Waller, the kind of head of the Black Ops Suicide Squad or Task Force X team that's made up of villains that are forced to do work for Black Ops works for the government, or is it just Amanda Waller? I mean, how much is she really doing stuff for the government and how much is she just doing stuff for herself? That's a big kind of like topic, I think, here, where she is taking matters into her own hands, is kind of being a vigilante on a global level, not trusting metahumans at all, and wants to be able to get them all under control. And so the Suicide Squad Dream Team miniseries seems to be kind of leading into that. Now, pretty central to this story has been the character of Dreamer, a transgender woman character. So in other words, biological male who is aiming to pass as a female. And this character, I believe, was featured on one of the CW superhero shows. But anyway, Dreamer is pitted against Amanda Waller and presents Amanda Waller as talking about her being on the moral high ground, and she's always talking about the greater good. Meanwhile, Amanda Waller is fostering a lot of paranoia and bias against aliens, as in aliens from outer space. And I talked about in a recent issue of, I think it was Superman or something, how this parallel doesn't really work. If there's some kind of commentary going on here about immigration and maybe the politically conservative position on immigration, you can't really have a worthwhile, nuanced, meaningful discussion or commentary on that, when instead we're talking about aliens from outer space who are bringing who knows what biologically with them to the planet. So there would be actually legitimate reason to be concerned until Star Labs says otherwise about that kind of alien immigration. But anyway, but Dreamer is part alien. And so I'll just, for the sake of the story, say she. They of course, they can conveniently draw Dreamer to perfectly pass as a female. So kind of in my head canon, I'm just kind of treating Dreamer as a biological female as well. Anyway, so she is half alien, and so she is taking this very personally. In other words, what Amanda Waller's doing and what she's kind of encouraging people to think and getting people riled up about. She says that Amanda claims to take the moral high ground and is fighting for the greater good, but what good comes from whipping up racists and sicking them on innocent people? And of course, we can draw some parallels there from this radical extreme right that has this element of racism and has become violent and stuff. And so I'm trying to figure out, well, what are we doing here? Are we doing? I mean, I'm not plugged into politics enough to know what might be intended here. Is this a Amanda Waller equals Donald Trump thing, or I don't know. So I'm actually kind of grateful that I'm not tuned in enough to know if there's some kind of like really what I think would be a really sloppy parallel being made here. So I'm just mostly taking the story at face value, but it does make me wonder, okay, this is interesting. What maybe is being said here? But there was a couple interesting things that stood out to me more than those kind of potentially political commentaries going on. One is when Dreamer says, I refuse to believe Amanda Waller has that much power. And then another character says, and that's why you're going to lose, because you still think the good guys always win. You think that because you fight for goodness and hope that the universe has to be on your side. Well, it doesn't. People like Waller don't get to be where they are because life is fair. And, you know, of course, the universe is being subbed in here for God, but often people are kind of nebulously talking about the same thing if you really get down to it, whatever their concept of higher power, ultimate authority, ultimate control, ultimate sovereignty over the universe, you know. So there's kind of like this angry complaint, recognizing that this great power does not ensure that life right now is fair. And I think that thought has led some people to conclude, well, there can't be a God who is good and all-powerful because he's allowing all of these horrible things to happen. And I can understand that. When I'm going through some difficult things, then like the psalmist, I'm saying, what is going on, God? You say you're this, you say you're this. Why is this happening? And you know, there's the emotional problem of evil and the logical problem of evil. The logical problem of evil, pretty easy to kind of reconcile with the love of God, the all-powerful nature of God, both being true. All you have to allow for to make that kind of go through, I mean, I'm not stating this, you know, as a philosopher would. You can see reasonablefaith.org for a much better presentation of this argument. But the idea being that could the all-powerful being be justified, have reasons that would justify allowing some of this suffering, allowing some of this wrongdoing right now? And the fact is, we are just in no position to say he could not have justifiable reasons for allowing these things to happen. We just do not have the perspective, we don't have the data or the ability to collect that kind of data to say that no, it is not possible. I don't even think we can say it's unlikely that this being would have justifiable reasons for allowing for a time for these things to happen. Of course, we don't really wrestle as much as we think we do with the logical problem of evil. We really wrestle with the emotional problem of evil. And what we want in those moments is not really an answer to that question of why, but we want the pain to go away. And I think part of us thinks that if we understood why, maybe we would feel better about the pain. Maybe we could deal with the pain more. I think sometimes that can help. But the pain is still going to be the pain of losing a loved one, of being totally mistreated and rejected by the people that love us. It's all still really going to hurt at the end of the day. And so for that emotional problem of evil, that's when we need love and support people around us who can give us those things. The other moment that really stood out to me was when Dreamer goes and attacks these these racists, I guess, against aliens from outer space racists, who are attacking an elementary school. Of course, this is horrific. And they've set it on fire. They're throwing Molotov cocktails in the windows to just keep the fire going, saying, "Go home, ETs, yeah." And then Dreamer comes on the scene and throws the Molotov cocktail back in this guy's face and comes out just in a state of absolute dominance and control of the situation. But it's what she says that I find really interesting, coupled with her actions. The racist guy says Earth belongs to humans. And she comes out and says, "You are not human. Humans have souls." And then she blasts him in a dramatic moment that, of course, we're supposed to find very satisfying. Or maybe not. There's reason to think, as her other teammates come and try to talk her down from this kind of approach, these kinds of actions, there's reason to think that we are maybe supposed to have more complex feelings about it. And I think that's appropriate. What Dreamer is doing here, when Dreamer herself has felt victimized, threatened by all this, the target of this kind of bias, what's happening? She is turning around and dehumanizing, literally, these other characters. Now, maybe not literally. I mean, the word literally is misused. But I think if you were to ask Dreamer if this was a real person, I think at the end of the day, maybe she would say they are still humans. But what she's saying here is mentally setting aside their humanity, and I think doing that to justify just letting them have it as she does. And that is something, I don't care who you are, Christian, non-Christian, whatever your viewpoint of any matter, when you have a very strong viewpoint and you're feeling wronged by one or more or a group or a demographic of people or whatever it is, you're feeling wronged by those who hold the position that is counter to yours. If you're feeling wronged enough, the temptation is very great, and so many of us give into it, myself included, at least mentally, before correcting myself. We give into that temptation to just label this other group of people as something. With some other label, whatever that label is, whatever that name is, we categorize them, stamp a label. Oh, you're just a bunch of blank. Oh, you're this. Oh, those people are this. Whatever the label is that we assign them. And that takes them one step away from us needing to think about them as valuable, as made in the image of God, as all people are. Now, I'm not the type of person, I don't think, that would ever say these kinds of things, label other people's like this, you're a that, in a direct conversation. But it gave me pause to think about times that I've talked about a certain demographic, a certain swath of people that have a certain political or philosophical view that I strongly disagree with and I think is very damaging. Sometimes in conversation, we can use labels that are convenient for the sake of conversation, but at the same time, man, there is a fine line, and we can mentally cross a line into categorizing them in a lowering, lessening, devaluing kind of way, a dismissive kind of way. But what did Jesus do when he was talking about people that were actively killing him? What did he say about them? He said, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They're not seeing truth right now. They don't realize the severity of what they are doing in this moment, what they are thinking, how they are acting. They are not seeing it." Was Jesus not saying, was he saying they weren't responsible? I don't think he was saying they weren't responsible. And I don't think he was asking God to just blanket forgive them and not be just about it. But I think in that moment, if I were to guess, if I were to speculate, I think this is in keeping with the breadth of Scripture. Jesus' desire was for his Father to forgive them, that they be forgiven, that they go on the journey that is needed to see their sin and turn to Jesus, turn to Yahweh for the full and free pardon that is provided through Jesus that is tirelessly applied to them from that day forward once they believe. I think that's what he wanted. He wasn't talking about the mechanism in that moment of how that would happen, but that was his end. That was his end desire for them, the people that were hurting him, that were actively killing him. And so that gives me pause to think about, how am I? I think I tend to be a little more relaxed in talking about things. Well, I'm definitely more relaxed in talking about things when I'm talking to my wife, because I'm less concerned she's going to misunderstand me. It's not an online conversation. But there are times where, like in those relaxed moments with my wife, I would maybe refer to a demographic slice by a certain label. And sometimes, like I said, that's appropriate. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes I'm using an expression that's maybe a little bit, though not on its face, disrespectful. In my heart, there's some bleh. There's some bleh that I'm feeling, and maybe a little bleh that I'm expressing. And maybe I'm inadvertently, in some small way, poisoning my wife's view of those people. I don't want to do that. I want to adopt the mindset that Jesus had, that they are valuable. I want to long for those people to experience forgiveness and freedom, because so often when people are hurting us because of a strong view that they have, it's because ultimately they're under some kind of slavery. They're enslaved to a viewpoint that is running their lives. Anyway, to have the eyes of compassion, the perspective that Jesus had, I so need to develop that more. But anyway, yeah, that was definitely kind of a moment that wasn't intended, of course, I don't think, for the writer, for me to go down that path. Very possibly, they wanted me to think a very different way and go down a very different mental path. But, we can use moments like these when we direct our hearts according to Scripture and as the Spirit is leading us based on truth in His Word. I think we can be led to some good and healthy places, even when we're interacting with content that may have no interest in those kinds of thoughts. So yeah, Suicide Squad Dream Team number 3, we're going to be wrapping it up with number 4. I'll be interested to see how this closes out, how it really leads into the big Absolute Power event. I'm very curious about how that is going to go down. Okay, so my ring selection for this week is the Indigo Ring of Compassion, and yeah, it's absolutely because of this last moment here that we can't afford to just label other people in our minds. We need to learn the compassion of Jesus as we're thinking about even those we very much disagree with, maybe even those who have hurt us in the midst of that strong disagreement. So anyway, yeah, I think those are all of my comic books. On my comic books, those are all of my thoughts on comic books for now. As always, I would love to get your thoughts about these comics, about maybe something else that came out in the Ultra tier this last week that I haven't talked about. You can leave those in the comments below. As always, I hope you check out christiangeekcentral.com. We got a ton of content there for Christian geeks as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.